What's up, family? Before we get into this, hit that like button, share the video with somebody who needs to hear the real story. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on those post notifications so you never miss a breakdown. And check this out, 24 hours, that's all it took. After months of them telling you this bill was dead, after failed vote after failed vote in the Senate, after Chuck Schumer stood on the floor and declared the Save America Act was going absolutely nowhere. The House of Representatives passed it twice in a single day. And for the first time since this entire fight started, Democrats crossed the line and voted for it, interestingly. And I want you to sit with that for a second. I mean, these are members of the same party whose leadership has spent over a year telling their base that requiring an ID to vote is some kind of extremist plot. And six of them just looked at the camera and voted yes. Now, and I said six based on one vote. But when you look at the full picture across both votes that day and the surrounding whip counts, we're talking about a number that has Hakeem Jeffries' leadership team scrambling to figure out what just hit them. 13 Democrats, and I'll explain that number and where it comes from. But first, you need to understand the full scope of what happened on Capitol Hill because this changes the entire game headed into November, honestly. Now, let me rewind and set the table for you, right? Because to understand why this week was a political earthquake, you have to remember just how dead this bill looked 7 days ago. The Save American Act is President Trump's signature election bill, and at its core, it does two things. It requires voter ID and proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections. Show ID at the polls, prove you're a citizen when you register, and that's it. That's the whole bill that has torn Washington apart for over a year. The House has passed versions of it three separate times before this. It hit 50 votes in the Senate during the marathon amendment sessions, and every single time it slammed into the same wall, the 60-vote filibuster, with Senate Majority Leader John Thune openly admitting Republicans were nowhere near the votes needed to break through. 7 Democrats, that's all it would have taken to pass it the normal way. 7 Democrats willing to say citizens should prove citizenship. Not one overcrossed, or not one ever crossed, I should say. Not one until this final week have crossed. And through all of it, President Trump refused to let this bill die. He made it the centerpiece of his 4th of July address at America's 250th anniversary, and he made it the centerpiece of his primetime speech from the East Room. And reports confirmed he told his team he would not sign any other legislation into law until Congress passed a strict proof of citizenship voting bill. Think about the weight of that statement. The president of the United States put an entire legislative agenda of his own government on ice for one bill. Nothing else moves, nothing else matters unless this gets done. Now, here's where the strategy gets interesting because what Speaker Mike Johnson did next was something political insiders will be studying for years. He didn't try one move, he loaded 3 chambers at once and pointed all of them at the United States Senate. All right. Let's talk about move number one. Move number one. The House passed the budget resolution for what leadership is now calling Reconciliation 3.0, officially branded the Save and Protect America Act. The vote was razor thin, 216 to 214. 2 votes. That's the margin between victory and total collapse. One member stuck in traffic, I should say. One member stuck in traffic. One bad morning, one person changes their mind, and this thing dies on the floor in front of the whole country. And here's what's inside that framework, according to reports. The resolution outlines $95 billion in new spending, including $60 billion for the Armed Services Committee, $13 billion for the Intelligence Committee, $12 billion in farm assistance, and $10 billion set aside with the House Administration Committee. That could be used to advance elements of the SAVE Act. Now, pay attention to that $10 billion because this is the key to the whole strategy. Remember the Senate parliamentarian, the unelected referee who ruled that a straight election mandate isn't budgetary and therefore can't ride in a reconciliation bill. That single ruling killed the bill's fast track. So Republicans learned from that defeat. They stopped trying to write a mandate and started writing a check. Grants, federal dollars flowing to states that adopt voter ID and proof of citizenship laws. And here's why that matters. Reconciliation cannot be filibustered. 51 votes, no Democrat permission slip required. No 60 vote supermajority needed. The grant version is narrower than the full bill, but alive beats pure and dead every single time from a procedural standpoint. All right. Now, move number 2 is the one that made history. All right. That same day, the House passed the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2027, with the full Save America Act attached by a vote of 216 to 212. Let me say that again so it lands. The Save America Act, the full legislative package, the proof of citizenship requirement, the voter ID requirement is now riding inside the annual defense bill. The must pass legislation that authorizes the entire United States military. You know what else is in that defense bill? Pay raises between 5 and 7% for military personnel, increase weapons procurement, replenish stockpiles. Read that combination carefully. Pay raises for every soldier, sailor, airman, and marine serving this country, and stapled to all of it, election integrity. Now, do you see the trap? Do you see what Johnson actually built? Senate Democrats spent all year filibustering the SAVE Act as a standalone bill. And politically, they could survive that because blocking an election bill is an abstract fight most voters never see the details of. But now try filibustering it when it's welded to troop pay raises during an active conflict in an election year on live television with your name on the vote. Every single Democrat senator who blocks this package is now on the record blocking the defense of the United States and a raise for the men and women who serve our country. And thank you for your service. But that's not an abstract fight anymore. That's an attack ad that writes itself. And here's the moment that changes the entire story of this fight. For the first time since this battle began, the Democrat wall cracked. 6 Democrats voted yes on that NDAA vote. Henry Seller of Texas, Don Davis of North Carolina, Gerald Golden of Maine. I'll say it again, Jared Golden of Maine, Vincietta Gonzalez of Texas, Adam Gray of California, Maria Glusenkamp Perez of Washington. Write those names down because each one of them sits in a tough competitive district where they looked at a bill containing voter ID and proof of citizenship and made a cold political calculation. Voting no was more dangerous than voting yes. And that tells you everything about where the American people actually stand on this issue. And don't take my word for it. I want you guys to actually check out James Carville, who happens to be, the political strategist for the Democratic Party. Very well known, been around for a long, long time.
We are not going to win the war against some kind of ID. Every poll shows 75 or better say we should have some kind of an ID to vote. Some say, I don't know what it is, but just quit fighting and go along with it and move to the next thing.
Is that a tufted headboard? Is James Carville in bed?
Yes.
Is he okay? Democrat strategist James Carville is telling his party to give up the fight over voter ID, and apparently he does it right before he falls asleep. He's arguing it's terrible. It's a terrible hill to die on, Democrats. And this is the Dems are pushing back against the Save America Act. New Fox polling shows voters overwhelmingly support ID requirements for when you vote. Roughly 8 in 10 said photo ID should be required to prove U.S. citizenship.
So there you have it. Democrats just lost the narrative on voter fraud, right? Now, move number 3 is the one almost nobody is talking about. In that same final sprint before the August recess, House leadership also tucked pieces of the Voter ID Act, a standalone provision of the SAVE Act, that will overhaul how voters nationwide prove their identity at the polls, and to a bill related to congressional stock trading. Think about that pairing. The stock trading ban is one of the most popular bills in America, an issue where the public is practically anonymous across party lines and tucked inside voter ID. Right? That's what's tucked inside it. The stock trading ban. A second must pass vehicle. A second impossible choice for Senate Democrats. And to clear the runway for all of it, the House passed a stopgap spending bill that punts the government shutdown battle to after the November midterms, taking the one piece of leverage Democrats were counting on completely off the table until after the election. So count them with me, right? Count them with me. 3 vehicles, 3. The reconciliation package with $10 billion in election grants, the defense bill with the full SAVE Act inside, the stock trading bill with voter ID inside. Johnson didn't just reload after months of frustration. He loaded 3 chambers at once and pointed all of them at the United States Senate. All right. Now let's talk about what the other side is saying, because, I always show you the full board. Critics have a few arguments, and I'll give you their strongest card. They'll point out that even if the Senate passes the $10 billion grant program, it would take effect in fiscal year 2027, and it would take the federal government time to stand up a new funding program and award grants, meaning no impact on this November's elections. And you know what? Supporters don't even disagree with the timeline, because this fight was never about one election. It's about permanently changing the architecture of American voter, state by state, dollar by dollar, for every election that comes after this one. All right. 7 states have already passed their own proof of citizenship laws since 2024. So $10 billion federal dollars would pour gasoline on that movement nationwide. And once states build these systems, they don't tear them down. Now, let's be honest about the obstacles, because, I don't sell you fantasies. There are real roadblocks still standing. Obstacle number 1, the Senate parliamentarian. The same unelected official who haunted this bill all spring ruled last month that the SAVE provisions did not fit the reconciliation rules. The new grant-based strategy survives only if the money-based design passes what insiders call the bird bath. But the process where the parliamentarian scrubs out anything that isn't strictly budgetary. Obstacle number 2, the Senate math. Here's a number the cheerleaders don't want to say out loud, but I will, because you deserve the truth. The last time the Senate voted on the SAVE Act, 4 Republicans voted against it, meaning it failed to receive even a simple majority support. So this fight was never only about Democrats. This is persuasion work to do inside the GOP conference itself. Obstacle number 3, timing. Senate Majority Leader Thune has downplayed the proposal's chances amid strategy differences with Speaker Johnson. While the House passed his stopgap funding bill, Thune prefers a different spending package that he hopes to strong-arm Democrats into supporting. Even the 2 Republican leaders aren't fully synced on strategy, and the Senate calendar itself has been thrown into disarray. All right? And that's just the truth of it itself. But I'll let you also see the proof of what I have on the screen right now of the Democrats losing the narrative on voter fraud, because the simple fact is you have someone like Abby Phillip, who's on CNN, defend when it comes to illegals voting in itself, which shows you they're saying it out loud. They're not hiding it, which makes it, in our case, as we the people see, every right to justify the SAVE Act being passed.
He's been in office for a full year now. They have not come up with any of this purported evidence of voter fraud. You guys are in search of something that there's been no evidence exists. New Jersey is double checking its voter rolls tonight after a software error added 6,600 non-citizens to the voter rolls. The suggestion that this is fraud suggests that these people were trying to vote. Sometimes what happens is that when state systems are incorrect, people receive information and they are confused. Where some people who are ineligible to vote are not aware that they're ineligible to vote. I do think it's whether it is widespread or not matters. I do think that the numbers actually matter.
Ignorance. Some voters are voting are not aware that they're not eligible to vote. So then why do you think we want to we the people and most of America, even Democrats and Republicans, it's a bipartisan thing in regards of passing to ensure that election integrity is upheld because we want to make sure that you know you're eligible to vote. You think, dummy? You think, right? So look at this McLaughlin poll, right? Save America Act support from July 15 to July 21st, 2026. 1,000 general election voters. Only U.S. citizens should vote in federal elections. 82% require proof of citizenship to register. 78% require photo ID. 78%. Right? But here's what the other side don't want you to see is this. Chuck Schumer went to the Senate floor and attacked the bill's registration requirements, claiming in-person registration is something only 5% of Americans do today, basically calling Americans dumb to not be able to uphold or basically get a voter ID or ID like we don't need IDs for everything else. Like when you're 21 and then drinking alcohol, you need voter ID to go into a federal building. You need voter ID even to prove certain packages that you may pick up at FedEx or the post office or UPS. I mean, what are we talking about here? But I want you to think about that for a second. Think about that number for a second. Only 5% of Americans do today is basically only 5% of individuals that claim in-person registration, right? That's what Chuck Schumer is saying. So if you think about that number for a second, he picked a specific statistic to argue against this bill. And here's what happened next. The fact checkers looked into it, and PBS reported that the rate of in-person registration is actually higher than what Schumer claimed. The Democrat leader's central argument against his bill didn't survive contact with his own side's fact checkers, because we know PBS is very, very pro-Democrat. PBS, the network. So when your best argument needs a correction from the people whose job is to check facts, you don't have an argument anymore. You have a talking point on life support. Now, to be fair, Schumer's office would probably argue the distinction is minor and the broader point about registration barriers still stand, right? Because they want to basically say, oh, there's barriers and individuals are going to have a hard time getting registration or IDs, and it promotes disenfranchisement, right? That's their whole talking point. That's their whole sell of why they don't support this thing, right? And I done told you my reasoning of basically ID is a way of life. You can't even get into a club, federal buildings, or anything like that if you don't have ID. I mean, if you want me to just basically call out the hypocrisy, let's look at Obama's presidential library that just went up in Chicago. Oh, yeah, you need an ID to get in there, right? That's what I thought. That's what I thought. So, with that being said, because I know I'm not crazy, family, correct me if I'm crazy or we crazy, because they're trying to paint us crazy, family, and I don't appreciate it at all. So, it's not okay. It's just not okay. So, when you look at it, right, the registration barrier still stands. That's the argument, right? With Chuck Schumer and them. But here's the thing. If your best number doesn't check out, everything else you're building on top of that number starts looking shaky too. Because you want to say only 5% of individuals register in person when it comes to voting. Or I should say, again, you have been fact checked by your own people from PBS. And the number is actually higher. You're only saying that in-person registration is only 5%, whatever. So here's where the board stands tonight. And I want you to picture it clearly. The budget resolution now moves to the Senate. The defense bill with the SAVE Act attached is heading to the Senate before it can reach President Trump's desk. All right. The stock trading bill with voter ID inside is right behind it. All right. The shutdown fight has been pushed safely past the midterms and the House of Representatives after being mocked for months as all talk and no delivery, just deliver everything it possibly could deliver in the space of a single week, right? So the ball is now entirely, completely, and undeniably in the United States Senate's court. And every single senator knows the whole country is watching what they do next. Right, family? They know. So, here's what this looks like in real life. As you see this article that I put on the screen just now, Trump demands Thune not let Senate leave until SAVE Act is passed. So that just justified my point of basically every senator staying there behind there in the shutdown fight has been pushed to ensure that this takes place and that we get answers. We, the people who they are working for, they should be working for. So all of this thing of being in recess and shutting this bill down, or, kicking the can down the aisle, as we like to call it, buddies. No, 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 no. Do your damn job. Regular people who got jobs, pay bills, raise families, people who have to show ID to buy cold medicine, to board a plane, to cash a check, to enter a federal building. Watching their elected officials argue about whether asking for identification to vote is somehow controversial. And when 6 Democrats from competitive districts break ranks and vote yes, that's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence, family. When you have 6 Democrats right here that I just put on the screen again, that's survival instinct. That's members reading their own internal polling and deciding they will not walk into November defending the idea that asking for ID is extremism. And I'll put it on the screen again. You want to know why, family? Because if you really look at it, the Democrats lost the narrative on voter fraud. You can't sit there and say voter fraud doesn't exist, and then you have 6,600 individuals that Miss Abby Phillip mentioned as a glitch in New Jersey took place, and then going to say, oh, well, some people vote and actually don't even realize that they're not eligible to vote. Justifies why you're losing the narrative, the Democrats in this case, for voter fraud. You're just being ignorant. And that's why the survival instinct of these Democrats is here, right? These 6. And then the polling speaks for itself, right? I mean, it's self-explanatory. And this reminds me of something from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 17 says, the first to prevent his case, or if the first to seem right, to another comes forward and questions him. That's the whole situation right here. For over a year, the narrative was that this bill was a partisan power grab, that requiring ID to vote was somehow designed to suppress turnout, that it was extreme and unnecessary, and that the case seemed to hold because it was only the case being presented in a lot of mainstream spaces. But now, not even to mention, Susan Collins, right, says the SAVE Act would ensure confidence in election results. Susan Collins, okay, family? And I mention her point, even though she's a Republican, because that's just the truth of it all, right? That is the truth of it all here. That is the truth of it all. And when you look at it, right, because I'm going to keep that up there. Actually should go in a frame. Actually, why? It actually should go as a picture. And I love Senator John Kennedy. He's so hilarious, man. I would love him to put this, as I have on the screen right here, print it out, put it on a big cardboard thing, and have it there as they continue to not go to their August recess and fight for the behalf of the people, working for us, the people, as they like to use our tax dollars, but they don't want to work and do the work when they're barely in office. And let Senator John Kennedy put that there as Democrats be reminded for their ignorance to come to their senses, as we already see that 6 Democrats are breaking ranks. So when you look at it, right, and I mentioned the whole thing when it comes to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 17, right? First to presents his case seems right until another comes forward and questions him. Well, for over a year, the narrative was that this bill was a partisan power grab, right? And that case seemed to hold because it was the only case being presented with the mainstream liberal media, CNN, MS Now, MSNBC, ABC, you get it. But now another witness has come forward with receipts, and 6 Democrats breaking rank, 3 procedural traps set, a fact check that undercut leadership's central claim, Chuck Schumer, and suddenly the first case doesn't look as solid as it used to. So the life wisdom here is simple, and it applies whether you're talking about politics, business, or just everyday life. When the people who are supposed to be aligned against something start peeling off, that tells you the foundation underneath them is cracking. Watch the defectors. Watch the ones who break ranks. as you see on the screen, the 6 Democrats. They're usually the first sign that the consensus you thought was solid was never as strong as it looked. Pay attention to the people who change their position when the cameras are rolling and the votes are being counted, because those are the people who are reading something the rest of the room hasn't figured out yet. So let me know what you think in the comments, family. Does the Senate finally pass the Save America Act this time? Yes or no? And name your state so we can see which senators need to hear from this audience. Hit the like button, share this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications for that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate, family. I'll catch you next one. Peace.